Hello guys, welcome to our course Python for Data Analysis. In the last section, we'll talk about for loops, which we use to execute block of code repeatedly based on a certain condition. In this section, we'll be talking about a sister of for loop, which is known as while loop. And while loop is used to execute a block of code repeatedly as long as a certain condition is true. So let's code and see the difference between while loop and for loop. But before we start coding, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel. Let's code.
9 to 5 data.
In Python, while loops is used for repeatedly executing a block of code, as I've explained earlier. So as long as a specific condition is true, the loops continue to iterate until that condition becomes false. So while loops are useful when we want to perform tasks multiple times without knowing in advance how many iteration we are going to need. So let's take for example, and we'll start with a very simple while loops, and this one we are going to create a counter that will count from 1 to 5. So let's start. So the first thing we need to do is to initialize the counter, and by doing this we can do a simple variable and say counter equals to 1. So we are starting our counting from 1. Then we can write a while loop that will count from 1 to 5. Then we'll say while loop, while count is less or equals to 5. What do we want to do? We'll write the code of what we want to do. We'll say print count. And we'll do count plus or equals to 1. Let's explain this code now. What we have done is first we initialize the counting. That is, we'll provide a variable and set it to 1. And after that, we'll do a while loop that will check if our variable is less or equals to 5. So if our variable is less or equals to 5, what we want to do is first we'll print the initial value of our variable and do that initial value plus 1. So every time we check if our variable is equals or less than 5, so we'll be adding 1. And the moment our variable is equals to 5, then we'll stop adding 1 to the initial variables. So let's print this. So we can see that the first time we check if our variable is less or equals to 5, we are going to print our value of variable. And after that again, we check again, is our variable less or equals to 5? And if that is also true, then we add 1 to our variable, which has make it to become 2. We check again, is this condition true? So for every time the condition remains true, we are adding 1 to our variable. So that is equals to 1 plus 1, making 2. So we'll try again, 2 plus 1 equals to 3. We'll try again, 3 plus 1 equals to 4. So the condition is still true. And we'll try again, 4 plus 1 equals to 5. So right now, the condition, after this, the condition becomes false. That is, if we try again and say 5 plus 1 will equals to 6. So which will make this condition to become false. That is, our count value will now be equals to 6, which 6 is not less or equals to 5. So this whole condition, the moment it becomes false, our while loop will stop. So the loops continue to iterate as long as the condition, which is count less or equals to 5, is true, and it prints the current count to the console. So we can also take an example, and let's say we want to simulate rolling a 6-sided die until we roll a 6. To do that, we actually need a module called random. So let's import the module, import random. So what this does is allow us to generate random numbers. Then we initialize our variables. So to do the rolling of the dice now, what we want is the roll and the counting of the roll. The goal we want to achieve here is to use a while loop to simulate rolling a 6-sided die until we roll a 6. The first thing is say roll equals to 0. That is, we initialize the roll. And the roll count, we want to say rolls count equals to 0. So after that now, we write our loop now. We write our while loop. And don't forget, in this condition now, we give a condition that the die should continue to roll until we roll a 6. So that is why we have given our roll to be equals to 0. And also, we want to know how long it takes us to roll a 6. Do you understand now? So that is why we have put roll count to count how many times we have to throw the dice to roll a 6. So we'll first write our while loop with the condition. We say while roll is not equals to 6. Then what do we want to do? We want to roll the die that is equals to random dot randint. So randint is to randomly generate an integer we'll specify between 1 and 6. So what this randint will do for us is help us to generate integer between 1 to 6. So this time around, 6 included. Do you understand now? So this is different from the range function we used earlier. So in the range function, the last number you specify, the stopping point you specify would be treated as 0 base index. But for round integer, so this stopping number will also be included. So what this is doing is that it is rolling the die. So let's say rolling the die. And the next thing we are going to do is do roll count. That is, we are counting how many times we want to roll, how many times we have to roll the dice to get to 6. So we just do plus or equals to 1. So that means this is increasing after each row. So that is what this is doing. Then we can print roll and the roll. So, and after that, let's say final printing is print. It took the row count rows to get a 6. Let's re-explain this while loop for us to understand what is going on. So what we have done is that we want to roll a 6, and that means we start our rolling from 0, and we want to know how long it took, how many rolls did it take us to roll a 6. That is why we have specified the condition in the while loop that roll is not equals to 6. So we have specified this condition. So the meaning of this condition is that our die will keep rolling until we get to 6. So that is why we have specified that, okay, roll should be equals to a random integer between 1 and 6. So every time we roll will have to be equals to an integer here. For example, once we roll, it can change to 5. Once we roll, it can change to 3. Sometimes it can change to 4 until we finally roll and it gets to 6. So that is when our while loop will stop. So that is why we have specified that, okay, roll is not equals to 6. And every time we go for a loop, we should equate roll to an integer between 1 and 6. And every time we are rolling, the row count should increase. So that is why we have done that row count to be plus or equals to 1. So every time we roll, it increases by 1. Then we'll print roll, and for each loop, we print the roll and what is the value we get. So at the end of the whole loop, this print statement will tell us how long it took us, how many row count it took us to get to 6. So let's run this. Here is the result. Now, the first row, the random integer assign 1 to the row. Since it is not equals to 6, it would try another row. So another row produce 1. Since that is not equals to 6, we'll start all over again. We'll roll another 1 again. So you can see we have different integer, 4, 5, 3, 1, 3. So until we get to 6. So the moment we have 6, the roll now, that means this condition will become false because the roll is equals to 6. So it will negate this condition and the while loop will stop. So because, the rules behind while loop is that you continue to iterate over a condition until that condition becomes false. Do you understand now? Until that condition becomes false. Now, the condition is now false at the last minute, which is when the random integer rolls a number of 6. And then we have to count all this. How long did it take us? So if we count all this together, you will discover that it took 9 rows to get a 6. So that is the concept of while loop. So in the next video, we'll explain an important activities when you are using loop, whether you are using a for loop or while loop, and they are called break and continue statement. So sometimes the way you write your loops, you can get into infinity loops that, when a condition becomes true, the loop will continue to go on and it will never stop. So for example, if I say roll equals to 1 and I put a condition and say while roll is equals to 1, so that will always be true and the loop will continue to go on and on and on. For us to be able to break out of the loop, we have the break statement, and sometimes if you have a condition you specify and you want to skip over a certain condition, then we use a continue statement. So we would explain the break and continue statement in the next video. You know what to do. Don't forget to put your question in the comment section, like this video and subscribe to the channel. Happy coding.